dancing, chatting, soothing, and generally showing off, albeit somewhat clumsily. This week's World Robot Conference in Beijing is just one of a flood of events hammering home the message that when it comes to robotics, China's number one.
Hello everyone and welcome to Moments Podcast. Today we have a very special guest from the other side of the world who is currently living in Paris, Peter O'Brien. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Chinese firms can develop robots more cheaply thanks to government support, massive investment, and manufacturing know-how. For foreign sales, Europe is a particular focus, with the US coming down harder on Chinese tech imports in recent years. Congress has warned that Unitree, the company behind these boxing robots, could use their remote access features to spy or cause disruption.
Do you want to do a very short introduction about yourself, what you are doing, in which kind of company, and what kind of job you are doing right now?
Yeah, France does feel like the other side of the world compared to the UK, even though I'm not that far geographically. So I'm a journalist in Paris. I work for a TV channel called France 24, and I do all sorts of things for them, from desk reports to reporting to presenting my weekly show called Tech 24, which is about technology news.
So, which means nowadays you need to interview a lot of different people and make videos for them and then, report this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. I do cover a variety of things, but I am specialized in technology news. I've been covering that side of things for about the last 5 years. And when I first started doing Tech 24, the format was very different. So it was a recorded show. Now we do a live show featuring live interviews. But at the time, I was kind of coming on set as an analyst to talk about various technology topics. And I did a section called Test 24, which was testing different gadgets, consumer gadgets, robots, drones, various silly bits and pieces that we could get our hands on to test in the studio. And that was quite complicated to do without much time to test them. So now we've moved to a more kind of serious news approach. And basically, we're trying to hold the big technology companies that are pretty much running the world these days to account and talk about where we're going in the future, what's good, what's bad. Obviously, the big topic at the moment is AI. So I talk an awful lot about that these days. But as you'll know, Shuang, before I did journalism, I was into theatre, did a lot of theatre work from quite a young age. And this, I think, has helped me to present myself in a more confident way when I appear on TV.
Nice. So, may I ask you a very silly question? Do you perform as a journalist in French or in English?
I do it in English, but a lot of the reporting that I do, so talking to sources and guests, I do in French because I'm obviously based in France. And I try to angle as much as possible what I do on what's going on in Europe, because France, as you'll know, is one of the two powerhouses of the EU, along with Germany. So it's a really important voice in terms of global regulation of technology. And it's a voice that can often be misunderstood abroad. So what I try to do is trying to bring those European and particularly French voices into this topic, which tends to be dominated by America, because that's the way things are with tech. But because there are interesting regulatory things going on here and interesting players here, and also there's just a different way of thinking about the world fundamentally in Europe, I try to bring those perspectives as much as possible. So that involves, of course, having a lot of discussions in French. Now, the one time I have appeared on the French channel, because France 24 has multiple languages, right? So we have an English channel, French channel, Arabic channel, Spanish channel, and they're all 24/7 rolling news. You can watch them all on YouTube live for free, anywhere in the world, pretty much. except maybe in China where you can't get them yet, but we're hoping to bring them there soon. Um, I did appear on the French channel one time, and that was for the coronation of King Charles III. They
Mhm.
basically wanted someone with a bit of a stereotypical British accent, even though I know very little about the royal family. And it was an interesting experience. I can't say I spoke with the most fluidity and was maybe as much of a suck up to the royals as they were expecting me to be, but it was an experience nonetheless.
So let's get back to your childhood memory, because you just mentioned that you have already performed in West End when you were quite young, right? What kind of, story you still remember at that moment? Or could you share like what inspired you to pursue a youth performer, at that moment?
Yeah, I was always from a very young age interested in the performing arts. I did dancing, singing, and acting at Stagecoach, which is an institution in the UK. Lots of people go to Stagecoach when they're little, and I remember getting various parts at the time. Like I played the Grinch in the Grinch. I think it's called the Grinch. Yeah, a green monster dancing around when I was about, I don't know, 8 or something, and yeah, I continued this until I was a teenager, and eventually my drama teacher there flagged up a opportunity to audition for The Sound of Music, which, as you say, was a West End production. Had never done anything on that kind of scale before, so I went through about at least 7 rounds of auditions for that. Once we'd got to the final audition, the only character that they hadn't decided on, that they hadn't casted, and of course, if you haven't seen The Sound of Music, which I'd be surprised if you hadn't, um, the real stars are this family Von Trapp. So the singing family that are part of this Austrian household with a very strict master. And obviously they meet Maria and she teaches them how to sing and have fun again. So they were still casting the Friedrich von Trapp role, which was the oldest of the 2 boys in the family. All of the other kids had been cast. And I just remember in the last audition, every single one of the children who'd been cast was sat in 3 rows because you have to have, when you have child performers in the West End, you have to rotate because you have to still do school.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd rotate 3 different kids for each role of the Von Trapp family members. And yeah, the only one that they had not cast at that point was Friedrich, the one I was going for, because I was about 13, 14. He's the oldest boy in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember they got all the remaining contenders to be Friedrich. I think there are about 8 or 9 of us to line up in a row and try and sing this top G, which was a very high note in the song So Long Farewell. And basically, one after the other, they got us to sing that top note. And if we couldn't hit it, we'd be out. So we were kicked out. Well, I wasn't, luckily, but I was right at the end of the line. So I remember hearing everyone's notes before me and thinking, wow, these guys are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I am forever grateful to my mum because the day before, she had the brainwave of asking my singing teacher to make sure we nail that part of the song because it's the hardest part for the role. And she just had a sneaking suspicion she might get us to do it on the final audition. And she was completely right. I kind of, at the time, slightly pushed back and was like, yeah, do we have to do that? I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe a little bit wary that I was not the best at the high notes. But I'm really glad that we did. We did it a bunch of times, and then luckily I was last in the line and managed to hit it. But it wasn't just that because then they spent an age basically lining us up with the families that had already been cast to see if we looked enough like them. So that's where it's really brutal, especially for children, right? Because you're not necessarily aware of your personal physique and look. Well, maybe you are starting to be at that quite young age, right? Especially as the Friedrich is the older part, 13, 14 years of age. So you're really starting to think about what you look like. And they're literally lining you up with the rest of them to make sure you fit in with the right family and
Mm-hmm.
of the right height and of the right hair color all of this kind of thing. And luckily, there was a family which was more on the kind of blonde side, and I was quite blonde at the time, so very Austrian looking. So that was it basically. I can't tell you what. I mean, basically, I loved performing, and this seemed like a great opportunity, which is why I went for it.
Nice memory. And it was like 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, so I've been 13 when I was cast. I'm 31 now, so that's yeah, about 18 years ago,
Mm,
isn't it?
quite a long time ago. But you continued to do theater and performance studies when enter the university, right?
Yeah, so I did English literature and theatre studies. Not so much the performance studies side, but I did do a lot of practical theatre work on the side of my curriculum. The curriculum was very much theory based. The
Mm,
one course that I did do, which was more practical, I dropped actually because I was much more interested in the lectures about the theory side of it. And I love Shakespeare, so the more Shakespeare that I could study, the better. But I did, since being a performer when I was a teenager, I tried to get various other parts and didn't really succeed. So I moved more into the kind of maybe odd performance role, but mostly in the production and direction capacity from there on.
that's quite different because, in mainland China, if we were youth performer when we were young, we'd prefer to continue as a, practical way rather than in an academic way. But you are
Yeah.
doing in a, opposite way. So that's,
Well, I think I realized that I was not the best. I mean, performer basically, because it's incredibly competitive. And I joined the National Youth Theatre after after the Sound of Music, which was also a very competitive environment. And I just realized, hang on a sec, there are people who are way better at dancing and singing and acting than I am. And I kind of just realized that maybe I'm more into the theory side of it. And I even though my drama teacher at school was incredibly charismatic and supportive of me in the kind of sort of performing capacity, um, I guess I'm quite glad that I didn't go into that for much longer, to be honest, because um, I would not have the career that I had today,
mhm.
uh, having chosen that path. If you think about it, it's like a pyramid, and the people at the very, very top are
Yeah.
very few. And there are loads of very talented people who want to be there, but who are all competing.
Mhm.
And I think I saw that for what it was. And I also saw the fact that I wasn't on that level.
Mm.
Um, and of course it took time for me to realize that. But I'm glad I did, because it can be a very difficult life. And the other thing that I think when I first started thinking about that was actually during the Sound of Music, because there were people who were in the ensemble. So those are the
Mm.
kind of supporting
Mhm.
performers who work every night.
Mhm.
Uh, you know,
Like chorus, right?
chorus exactly, and
Yeah.
they would do they're fantastic singers. Really had they all have very striking looks, because
Mhm.
everyone who works in the performance industry, you have to look the part as well. So people are very striking,
Mm.
have very striking features, incredible performers. But some of them had to busk in their free time, just to make their rent payments. Right, London is an expensive city, and even if they're performing, what would it be? Something like 9 times a week, with the
Mhm.
matinees on a Wednesday and a Saturday, and then every night apart from that. That plus having to busk at the same time, it's really grueling. And I could tell some of them were pretty jaded about it, even at my young age. So I thought, do I want to be that kind of? Do I want to live that life? You have to really, really love it
Mm.
to a degree which I wasn't personally comfortable with.
Mm. Which I would say a good choice, a smart choice, because after 2019, then it's pandemic.
Yeah, in countries like France, the little I know about kind of performance and employment law here, there are quite good protections. So if you are out of work, and you don't have a performance, you
Mm.
have some money from the government to keep you going until your next role, which
Mhm.
is great. But I know that even performers aren't necessarily happy with how much it is here, and then in other countries it simply doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
you got to be a tough cookie. You've got to be very passionate. And unfortunately, it's also what leads the industry to be quite privileged, right? Because
Mm.
people who are in it tend to have money from other sources. Um, and so for some that's on things like busking, which are also incredibly hard work, but for some it might just be family money. That's kind of the way I see it now. You might have listeners in the performance world who think I'm talking absolute rubbish. It's true that I've not been in the industry for a long time, but media is similar. Media is very, very competitive as well, but it's just a bit less so. It's a bit easier to, like, not, it's less of an extreme uh
Competitive.
triangle shape, pyramid
Mm,
shape. It's more,
mm.
it's a wider triangle or a
Yeah.
pyramid, if you like.
And you've got more choices to find a position, in media industry, I suppose, right?
Yeah, because if you think about it, every company, every organization, and every government body, every single organism you can think of on Earth needs some sort of communication to
Hmm.
sell what they're doing or to
Yeah.
reach their clients or
Hmm.
to reach their public. And to do that, you need media
Yeah,
because
definitely.
the world we live in revolves around media, and also with new media as well. There are so many different formats.
Mm.
Yeah, it's fundamentally there are more opportunities for sure.
My question is, when I say goodbye to you and you said you are going to Paris to go for a job, I was like, why? All of a sudden you choose to go to work in Paris, not stay in this country. So what was the reason that made you to choose to work in Paris rather than stay in the UK?
It happened the same year that Brexit happened, and I'd love
Yeah.
to say that it was some sort of protest move. I think it was slightly more banal than that. I've been thinking of learning more French for a few months because I did it at school and I did a little bit at university, but not for my course, just kind of on the side, having conversations with French people who wanted to learn English as well as language exchanges. Because I was fundamentally a bit embarrassed that in the UK we don't speak other languages at all, really, and they're not taught particularly well at school. I
Mhm.
understand the reasons for that because when you travel the world, it's not always necessary to be able to speak languages other than English, and you're never going to speak all of them, right? But
Mm.
I just thought French is something I learned at school. It's a very widely spoken language. Why don't I really have a go trying to crack this? And how hard can it be? I thought quite arrogantly. And the truth is that in the UK, we have this misconception that language learning um, is a black and white thing,
Mm.
whereby before you're fluent, you can't really speak it, and after you're fluent, you have no problems at all. The first question that you get from British people when they know you speak another language is, "Oh, are you fluent?" Well, that's actually a sliding scale of ability, which the line of fluency does not really exist,
Mm.
is my experience. And I naively thought that, oh, if I go to France for a couple of years, maybe I'll be able to be fluent and then that'll be that.
Mm.
But, it's absolutely not the case. But anyway, so that was the idea. And the fact was that at the time, because the Brexit rules hadn't come into effect, I was able to move there with no visa
Mm.
because there was freedom of movement with the UK as well at the time, which was a godsend. I would not have been able to do my career if that were not the case. I was able
Mm.
to move here with a community theatre job with a few teaching, a bit of money teaching, because I did a teaching training crash course just before I came. Like your other guest the other day, actually, who went to Japan and did the CELTA. I did the same thing as him, CELTA. So I had a couple of odd jobs here and there, and then very quickly found France 24 actually, and I was able to start there with no visa, just as a freelancer, and I got a contract a few months later, and the rest is history. I've been here almost 10 years, and I'm French citizen now. Yeah, it's definitely, I had no idea how long I'd be going for, but I guess I didn't really think I'd be here for 10 years yet. Here we are.
Yeah. But did you ever have any embarrassing moments during your like French live report or French daily conversation? Like
I still do.
accidentally saying a word wrongly, it
I do all the
completely.
time. I do all the time, Shong Shong. It's part of being an immigrant. As you know, when you, I mean, look, I'm unlucky. Like, I'm not as fearless as you are when it comes to speaking a language that you don't speak natively. I have a lot of complexes about it. And in France, it's particularly difficult to feel at ease speaking French. Well, in Paris, certainly, because people have a certain idea about their language. They're taught from a very young age that it's an incredibly sophisticated language, which it is, and demands respect. They have something called the Académie Française, which is a kind of group of esteemed scholars whose job it is to police the language and make sure it's being used correctly. So in France, you have an idea about correct French,
Mm.
which, in my personal view, does quite a bit to actually marginalize French speakers who don't speak it, the idea of perfect French.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas English is so widely spoken that there is less of an idea about what is perfect English and what is not. And certainly when I did the CELTA course, I was struck by they were encouraging you to teach your English.
Mm.
So there were two Indians there who were learning to be English teachers just like me. I actually struggled to understand what they were saying sometimes. But they were encouraged, you're going to speak your kind of English. You're going to speak Indian English, which is a form of English. It's totally fine, just like you have American English,
Yeah.
Irish English, Australian English, right? They're different forms of the same language. In French, it's more black and white. Obviously, there are exceptions. You have Quebecois, which is
Yeah.
Canadian.
Yeah.
Of course, there are exceptions, but generally, being in Paris is the heart of where good, like what's considered perfect French is spoken. And it's quite hard to find patience when you speak to people, both with yourself and with others.
Mm.
So it's a daily occurrence, me having the odd embarrassment here and there. Like, I don't always speak with a perfect register because I've also learned my French from a newsroom where people speak quickly and speak rudely to each other. It's just how it functions. It's not with any malice, but people tend to be quite. For instance, in French, you have a formal register, which we don't have in English. I don't know how it works in Chinese. There's also a formal register, isn't there? But it's used less often. Like, but I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you can, so for instance, if you have like ni and ni with the n on the end, it's like
Ning.
two, yeah, ni, it's like
Mhm.
two and vu in French. You obviously have like a formal register and you use it surprisingly often. You use it for any stranger. Well, there's so many rules about it, and it's the kind
Mm.
of thing that you only really start to get a grip on when you live here.
Mhm.
um so I've definitely made many, many mistakes. I'm trying to think of a funny example right now, but it's such a daily occurrence for me that I just constantly walking into embarrassment.
You already mentioned that you have kind of applied some dramatic techniques from what you have learned in university into the career that you are doing at the moment. So, what kind of techniques or tools that you think that is quite useful for you to develop your career?
I actually think there's just some very simple things, and one is line learning. I mean, when you're an actor, you have to learn lots and lots of dialogue, and it's the rules around that are very strict. You have to say the words that are on the paper, which is actually much more difficult than what I do in the sense of you learn the general ideas about what you're going to say or the kind of bullet points, and then you say it. But I think
Mm.
the rehearsal process is very similar for me. And I actually have noticed that I'm very strict with making sure I do rehearse before I go on set. It's not something every media, you know, presenter does, but I make sure I take a good half an hour at least to go over my lines basically and
Mm.
just practice in a quiet place, just practice saying what I'm going to say. And it helps me a lot. Now, it's also a way of engaging more with the audience because what was quite disturbing when I started to do on air stuff. And look, I'm absolutely not a total expert in this. I've still got a long way to go. I've only been doing on air presenting for, as I said, about 5 years now. You'll see the difference. People who've been doing it for 15, 20 years. There's that kind of ease with which people speak to a camera. And having come from theatre where you get immediate response to what you're saying, you can feel the eyes of the audience, you can feel them listening, and you can feel when you've lost them as well,
Mm.
right? So you can sense when you're being engaging and when you're just being boring or whatever, because they're there in front of you. When it's just a camera, there's none of that. There's
Mm.
none of that. So you have
Mm.
to kind of, that was a bit of a shock for me. But when I started trying to treat the camera lens as if I were doing something, for instance, like a soliloquy or addressing the audience, you start to treat that lens in the same manner, then it started to click and I started to feel a bit more comfortable.
Mm. Do you need to improvise sometime, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. This happens an awful lot and in many different situations. So, for instance, if you're out in the field reporting, okay, you might have prepared your first two questions and you might maybe have a couple notes written down or have them in your head.
Mm.
You'll go through these with the anchor before because you don't, that the little trade secret is when you see news anchors interview reporters at the scene, they've told them their questions before because they're colleagues and they don't want to trip each other up, right?
Mm.
However, they could always be a minute short or 2 minutes short and need to throw you more improvisational mode and trust that you've done the kind of groundwork to take you through those situations. And that's where the kind of eloquence stuff comes in, vocabulary, um, that takes a lot of time to learn. The other situation is when you've got guests and they say something that maybe is surprising or interesting and is not in your kind of list of questions, and you want to be like, hang on a sec, let's go into that a bit more. So something I have done is when I've anchored, because I do sometimes do anchoring as well, we'll have a special event. Like, for instance, I mentioned the King's coronation, or recently I did the funeral of Pope Francis, and we had several experts on set with us. We had our correspondents abroad to talk to in Rome, and I've got to be live for 2 hours straight talking
Mm.
about it.
Mm.
Okay, so you go in with your papers, your notes, your research, but frankly, after a certain amount of time, it kind of just goes up into the air, and you're seeing these pictures come in that no one's seen before. You're here listening to your producer in your ear, and you're trying to talk to your guests in a natural way. Um, that is pure improvisation, and
Mm.
the only way you can get better at it is really practice, I guess.
With the rise of social media, you know, all around the world, it seems that everyone can become a news reporter for a
Mm,
few minutes. You know, we can upload, you know,
yeah,
share the moments. And there's one Chinese media professor, I forgot his name or her name, but he once said, or she once said that journalists have permanently lost their advantage of being the first one to report news. This is because the first one to report on breaking news are not journalists, but the social media users. So in such an, you know, era, what do you think of, you know, is the significance of working in media industry?
that's a really big and important question,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the answer is um, what's the right word for it? I want to say accountability. It's not quite accountability. It's journalists. We still exist to make sure of the facts. People on the ground are not journalists. They're incredibly important to journalists because, as you say, they provide information far quicker than we've ever seen it before. But you still need people to check. You still need people to cross-reference stuff and make sure what's going on or being claimed
Mm-hmm.
is true. So actually, as many journalists as may have lost their jobs by being replaced by these people, reporting stuff from the ground, you've also now got loads of fact checkers employed to check user generated content, and they have to be journalists because only a journalist has the skills and the to kind of to cross reference stuff. There are certain standards in place, so I think I don't believe there's any way that journalists will just disappear, because people fundamentally still want to consume stuff they can trust. That's the word I was looking for. Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Average users don't necessarily trust each other. If
Mm-hmm.
you have a respected media outlet that people trust, and the reasons behind that have to be good, and it has to be something that they've built over a long, long time, that is where the advantage, that's the advantage that journalist outlets have, right? That's why they've existed for decades and will continue to do so, because trust is something you don't just build overnight, you build it over a long time.
And still, like as a journalist, probably you have the advantage to have a critical thinking of about the news which is happening all around the world, rather than just share it, post it, upload it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've
Mm.
got that relationship with your editor, which is really important. And the best media outlets are the ones with the best editors because they can see what a reporter is bringing them and they can have that critical eye on it and think, is this person a bit too close to their sources in this case? Because as a reporter, you do need to get close to your sources to get good stories. And
Mm.
that's where the editor comes in and is really important. And users or social media users who just post stuff,
Mm.
that's not necessarily what they're doing, right? It's the person on screen who's the kind of star and the creator of the content. And then you've got a network around them that's helping them polish this content and make it look as good as possible. They don't have a relationship with an editor. I think maybe there are exceptions now, right? Because these lines are blurring. We're starting to see YouTube channels that are doing quite good editorial stuff. But this editor reporter relationship is the absolute key to why journalism works. And it's not always a relationship that's just straightforward. There's conflict involved. There are disagreements, but it's part of the creative. It's almost a creative process, right? Because you're trying to create articles and things that people want to read as well as bring people the news. And that's where it all happens. Is in that relationship. Politicians exploit this kind of fake news for their own political advantage,
Mm.
um, and we have countries like the US where the main sources that people get their information.
Mm.
Well, not all of them, thankfully, but there are some clearly politicized outlets that frankly aren't doing good journalism, and it's
Yeah.
become as common to find that as it has to find trusted news. And I would just encourage anyone to check basically where their news outlet gets its money from, because
Mm.
that's fundamentally how you can tell whether it's going to be neutral or not, right?
Mm.
um, but it's very, very complicated. Obviously the press has always been something that's been subject to influence, and I'm not saying, by the way, that media outlets have to be free of any political condition. That's not the case. You can have a very good newspaper that has certain editorial standpoint. In fact, I almost think it's better to have one and be transparent about it and write your editorials and tell your readers where you are coming from, so that
Mm.
they can understand why they're publishing what they're publishing in general. Because it's very difficult to have a purely neutral news
Perspective.
outlet. Even one like mine, France 24, right? We were created by the French government. Now, we're not, it's important to know, we're not funded by the French government. We're funded by the taxpayer. We are funded by a levy on VAT that French people pay every day. That's where our money comes from. So in that way, we are free to criticize the government, and that's fine. However, our existence does depend on them, and in some way we're still French and therefore espouse certain French values, right? But I'm just saying there are ways to go about things which will create more trust with your viewers, and sharing fake news is definitely not one of those. And therefore, when politicians do it, it makes our jobs extra
Much more
hard, basically.
difficult.
But it
Mm.
does also give us more work, because then we can point out which politicians are spreading fake
This
news,
is
and we like
France's
that.
premier startup hub, and actually, I get the sense people care less about the diplomatic statement and more about that huge sum of investment that Emmanuel Macron announced yesterday, the 109 billion euros. That's to add to the Commission's announcement of a further 50 billion invested in AI.
So whether it's the theater that you have experienced over the years, or the media industry that you've chosen as your career, right? Both fall under the broader category of the culture and creative industry. And I remember in the UK, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair designated the culture and creative industry as a major policy priority like several years ago. And the government kind of have a loads of funds to support the culture and creative industry. So given
Hmm.
the current global economic downturn, the economy is so horrible all around the
Hmm.
world. How do you think the culture and creative industry can gradually emerge from this challenging period?
I think there's really different answers for creative industry and for media. I think I can probably only speak about media, because honestly, it does look quite a depressing time for both. I mean, particularly with the threat that AI poses as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think I would be earning a lot more money than I do if I had the answer to those questions. I certainly think I'll be very honest, when it comes to media, what I get quite depressed about is the kind of race to be on top all of the latest formats and technologies, because, and I see this at France 24, when TikTok becomes a big thing, it's like, oh, we need to create a TikTok to be able to reach people. And I understand it, right? Because you do want to be on the platforms that what build the biggest audiences. But
Mm.
I just worry about decisions that are purely chasing audience numbers and chasing advertising.
Followers.
Also, yeah,
Mm.
sometimes advertising money. We have
Mm.
quite strict rules about the kind of amount of money we have from advertising. But again, as a technology journalist, I see a lot of these decisions that media companies are making as playing into the hands of big tech and putting more power in their court. Whereas I think if you keep doing good journalism and keep funding original reporting, that is the best thing to do, both morally and I hope economically, because what's going to remain incredibly precious, even when AI takes over as it is
Mm.
original reporting. Humans can do this, robots cannot.
Mm.
We are the only ones with the power to talk to people and fundamentally get people to spill the beans. You
Mm.
know, the spill the kind of beans that are interesting and important to the public. And a robot is not going to start interviewing important people and getting them to share fundamentally what are the big issues affecting all of us today, and uncovering new stories,
Mm.
right? It's so, and this is actually something I wish I did more of, but reporting is something that is going to be incredibly important even into the future. And you do actually see some media companies now putting more money into that. I
Mm.
have to say, I'm quite depressed that a lot of mainstream ones like France 24 are not necessarily doing that. That's where the value is. Because, okay, you can polish something in 10 different ways, and you can make it a YouTube video, you can make it a TikTok account, you can make it a podcast, you can do
Mm.
every different format on earth. But what makes headlines? It's new information. That's what the news is about. It's about new information. How can we fund people to be doing this?
Mm.
There's not enough of it. There needs to be more of it. And I think it is a viable way to make your business or your news organization still viable into the future. I think it's a very helpful tool, etc. I'm just saying that there are things that it won't be able to do. And one of those things is gathering new information. And that's fundamentally what journalism is. So those kind of journalists, even though that's not all journalists, right? Because there are lots of people like me do a lot of kind of how can we make information explainable to the public, and how can we break it down in
Mm.
different ways. That's the stuff that's actually a bit more under threat. If you think about the actual value of journalism, whereas new information that the public does not know, bringing that stuff like investigations
Mm.
or conversations with important people that ask the right questions,
Mm.
um, that's the kind of thing that's really valuable. Yeah.
But like when AI and like media industry combine together, do you think it's kind of like a bubble which will, will probably not continue in 30 years or 50 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Is that a bubble in your mind?
I mean, it kind of looks like one, but one thing I will, to give you a sneak preview of what I hope is going to be my next report, which I pitched yesterday. So hopefully I'll get a yes for that. I'm really interested in the fact that, these benchmarks, right? These are things that a lot of computer scientists have put together to test how good these AI models are. And they're showing them, oh, wow, they're getting so good at science. They're getting so good at maths. They're so good at different humanities exams. There's nothing yet to test how good they are at creating art and creating original art
Mm.
that I've seen, right? So if you ask it to create like an amazing Shakespearean soliloquy, or an incredible violin solo, or an amazing painting that really breaks the mold, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, they just look like imitations. They just, because it's learned on stuff from the past. It's not, for me, it doesn't really break new mold, although it can be surprising
Mm-hmm.
and interesting and funny and whatever. I'm not seeing original creative genius there. So my next report hopefully is going to be putting this to the test and trying to get these AI boffins to create really original art and asking culture experts to react and think if it actually is anywhere close to it. And if
Mm,
it is close, should we be worried? If it's
mm,
not close, should we all just calm down a bit?
mm. Okay, to continue this topic a little bit further, to my mind, people all around me, whether they're doing computer science, whether they are really doing like some AI research, all of them, and some bankers even, they get so excited about the future of AI and they invest a lot of time and money into it. And I was like, um, actually, I'm telling myself, it's just because they can make some money from,
Yeah.
the
I think the
future.
tools are amazing and they will be beneficial, but so was the internet. And there was still a massive bubble which burst called the dot-com crash. This happened when the internet came along as well. Does it mean
Mm.
that we don't use the internet today? No, we
Oh
use it all
no.
the time. It's an
Yeah.
amazing tool that we all use every day.
Mm-hmm.
AI, I think, is the same. I think it will be really useful, but also will be a bubble.
Mm.
That's my view, just basing on the history of technology and how these things tend to go, because you're absolutely right. They want to attract as much investment as possible. And the way to do that is to generate hype. And just be aware that two ways to generate hype. One way is to say this thing is really incredible and it's amazing and we're all going to use it loads. The other way is to say
Mm.
this thing is really scary. It's going to take all our jobs. That is actually another way to create, ironically, to create investment, because people will look at that, investors will look at that trying to save money on manpower, and they'll say, great, less money to spend on people. So the dooming side about AI, even the part people saying it's going to kill us all, because those people really exist as well,
Mm.
it's hard to see that as not having been co-opted by the
Mm.
kind of people trying to sell these products as well. So any extreme opinions about it,
Mm.
personally, I tend to be quite cautious about.
Mm. Nice. Yeah, so never be too negative about the future of our life, right? Your
Negative
position
or
will.
positive, either. But then again, I am tend to be a very like an equivocating person and a fence sitter in every aspect of my life. So, but that's why I'm a journalist, right? Because we are professional fence sitters.
There was a group of students from the Communication University of China came to your TV, right? TV channel for some practical training or some courses, right?
I think 1 out of 10 of them had ever been outside China, and their level of English was incredibly impressive.
Mm.
Especially, I mean, I know that they're at this communications university, right? But they've
Mm.
never been outside China, and they spoke English not just to me, but like on camera as well. And so they're very confident, and they're actually very charismatic on camera as well. That was
Mm.
great. That was great to see.
Mm.
Um, that really impressed me. I mean, even to the point where one of them, so the report that we got them to film was to go, because I don't know if you know, but the River Seine opened in Paris for swimmers recently because they
Okay.
cleaned it for the Olympics
Yeah,
last year.
yeah, yeah.
So now you can go for a swim, and I've been for a swim, and it's slightly murky, but it's still refreshing.
Okay.
And yeah, I did get a floating chip quite near my mouth, which is a bit gross. But this boy on our course basically decided he would jump in for his report. So he got into his swimming costume and went for a swim,
Mm.
and did his little presentation from inside the Seine, which was just brilliant. So yeah, that I guess that probably um I maybe had some prejudices or assumptions about yeah, Chinese students. I mean, I had been warned by my Chinese colleague that they might be a bit shy.
Mm.
Not at all. They were brilliant. They were absolutely up for it. And in fact, sometimes it was hard to get them to stop. you know,
'Cause-
I
Mm.
arrived at 10 a.m., on the day that we were supposed to be filming. They were all there already filming and presenting. I was like, guys, we have not even started yet.
Because they are trained in that kind of way, in a very professional media creator or whatever. So
It's a competitive school to get into, right? It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Is
of
there
course,
any
yeah.
potential for international cooperation in news or media industry? For example, how can French and Chinese television stations or channels collaborate? Mm.
We do sort of work together in a way because we have subscriptions to content from Reuters, from AP, AFP, and I think CGTN as well, or CCTV, the Chinese television network. But they basically give their content to Reuters and then they send it to us. So I'm not exactly sure what the relationship is there, but in general, this is a it's not an easy collaboration to have because the rules of the game are so different and the expectations are so different. And frankly, in France, we're subject to fewer restrictions about the kind of thing that we can speak about in from what I understand, right? So it's in the in the in, this, in given that CCTV is very much part of the Chinese state, and as I explained before, France 24 is not. If we were to collaborate with CCTV, for instance, then we could be seen as collaborating with the Chinese government, which is obviously not something that we want to be seen to be doing. That's not to say
Why?
that if you're a brilliant Chinese journalist, you can't work for France 24. Of course not. We have Chinese journalists who, my producer on the weekends is Yi. He's fantastic. He's Chinese. He's worked for CCTV before when he did an internship years ago. We've got a presenter, an anchor who worked at CCTV before. There are ones from France 24 who go over there, right? But these are different career choices that people have on a personal level. Obviously there's different cultural expectations, and that's people's personal choice. It's the same as people who go to work for media in the Gulf states, right? People do things based on their personal ethics and the kind of journalism that they want to pursue. Direct collaborations are something that we try to, you have to get them approved. And I'm absolutely sure that if you were to say, I'm going to collaborate with CCTV as a France 24 employee, they would not let you because it's a competitor. Just because it's a competitor, right? Before we even get into questions about different journalistic ethics, they don't want to collaborate with potential competitors.
Oh no.
Sorry, maybe you were expecting a different answer, but that's the reality. It's a competitive space, and people have very different, ethical charters and approaches.
So let's look into the future, okay? So since you have been doing your job for years, I think more than 10 years, right? You just mentioned about it.
Yeah, I've been a journalist since end of 2016, so about 9 years or so.
Yeah, around 10 years. So will you plan to continue to do as a journalist or kind of, switch it into a producer or kind of team leader? What kind of plan in the next 3 or 5 years for you?
I do love editing. I mean, I've not done very much of it, but well, I do love editing and managing teams as well. But frankly, I don't really see that being my role at the moment. I do still love doing the kind of um, being the one carrying out the interviews, doing the on-screen stuff, because I love the fact that my only job is to find out what the truth is about a particular topic, and bring it to the public and explain it to the public. And I think one of my skills is bringing complex topics to the public. So I don't know. Well, currently, for Tech 24, I'm very much my own boss. I don't really I've got an editor who has a quick look, but I'm very much left to my own devices, which is probably not great. In terms of managing team, yeah, I mean, some of the best experiences I had when I was younger in theatre were doing the directing kind of thing and having a team to run. I absolutely loved it. When you're working with brilliant people, it's the most rewarding thing in the world. And I don't get to do that really. I mean, on the odd report, okay, you might have a camera person or a video journalist come with you, but working closely with someone on a story is the best part of journalism. I did an investigation with one other person a couple of years ago, and we worked intensely together for months. And because we were on the same wavelength, it was incredibly rewarding. So I cherish those experiences when they come up, but for me at least, I find them very difficult to come across. I've had that experience just a cluster of times in my whole career. I want to try and have more of them, but I'm not sure how to go about it.
Do you still, go for any performances or plays in Paris? Are there any, good place in Paris that you would recommend us as tourists to watch?
I wish I went to more theatre here, but I have to say I've been very disappointed by the quality of theatre in Paris in general compared to London. It's just not as I don't know. It's just the plays I see here tend to be not as good, and maybe that is why. That's also because they're in French. But frankly, I've not been overly impressed in general. I don't know. Maybe I've picked the wrong place, but I'd love also to go to Avignon one year because I'm sure there's some really interesting stuff. I think the stuff on the more experimental side can be a lot more interesting. But in general, there's a reason why London is one of the two theatre powerhouses of the world, right? With along with New York, it's because we know how to put on a bloody good show. And even the biggest show that France has ever put on, the Olympics opening ceremony last year,
Uh-huh.
from a theater perspective, I thought it was incredibly disappointing. I
Oh
went to see it.
no.
I was lucky enough to go to see it, and we did not see anything. I mean, literally, the boats went by, but we had no element of performance in front of us apart from a big screen showing us what was going on other parts of the river. So I thought that was a huge missed opportunity.
Mm.
Now, any French listeners will undoubtedly disagree with me because they loved it, but I thought it appealed to French people, but it did not appeal to the world. And the Olympics is about appealing to the world and welcoming the world to your city. So if that's the best France has to offer, personally, I was a bit disappointed.
That's a cultural barriers and gaps, I would say. But
Yeah.
probably it's because they are more traditional theater way, whereas for
Yes.
UK or New York or even Shanghai nowadays, we are doing very experimental theater all the time and we
Mm.
try new stuff all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even France has got Molière or blah blah blah, but it's
Yeah.
more like a traditional theater. Mm.
France has incredible theatre history. It's been so important for huge movements in theatre history, like the Théâtre du Bouffe du Nord in north of Paris is amazing pedigree. You've done the Gaulier training in south of Paris, obviously inspired by Lecoq. Transformed clowning. Anyone who takes themselves seriously as a clown will go and get trained
Yeah.
there. Molière, as you say, when you go and see the Molière at the Académie, at the Comédie Française
Yeah, that's the
now,
one.
which
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of plays there, and I find it like a museum piece.
Oh.
It's like people go to be educated rather than to be entertained, and I
Mm.
firmly believe that performance has to be both because the best way to bring people a message is also to thrill them as well. And I just don't connect with it.
See, yeah.
It's probably on me though. I'm probably just being a complete snob, and maybe a bit too patriotic.
We have similar tastes, when some French theater studies professional, scholars, they shared a lot of French theater performances in front of us. I was like, okay.
It's different cultures, different expectations, and I have to say I still don't understand it 10 years after being here. I find it difficult to connect. And that's, by the way, I did used to work in the theaters here. One of the first jobs I had was being working for a company that did subtitles. When you go to see foreign plays, and sometimes the big shows have subtitles for people who don't speak the language. So I worked for a company there, and so I saw a lot of the different plays around Paris because I had to welcome people, English speakers who didn't speak French, to the theaters to go and watch stuff, to make sure that
they
could find their
understand
way. And it's so I saw a few things, and nothing good. Someone is going to hear this and think he is so wrong. Let me take you to this play, that play, that play. I've had people try to do that in the past, and there are exceptions. Obviously, there are exceptions. I'm not saying that, but sadly for me, I've slightly given up on it, and I really should give it more of a go.
Yeah. Let's test. Probably next year we should probably go to Avignon together.
Yes. That's a great idea. We should definitely do that.
Let's
Love
do
the
it.
idea.
Okay, Peter, very nice to talk to you, and thanks for your contribution today.
You're more than welcome. It was an absolute pleasure.
Once again, thanks to Peter O'Brien for sharing his insights today. It has been enlightening to see the challenges required to succeed in the cultural and creative industries, as well as the countless moments of excitement and growth along the way. Thank you for listening. See you next time.